Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan. Our co-host Nick Stevens is out this week, but we are very happy to be joined by Steve Melewski, who's going to help us break down the biggest news of this season so far, which is the Orioles firing Brandon Hyde as their manager over the weekend and making Tony Manzolino their interim manager. We are also going to focus a little bit on the minor leagues and focus on Samuel Basallo, who's been heating up at the plate down in AAA Norfolk. But first, as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome some new members of our Patreon community. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. The team keeps losing, but we keep gaining patrons, and we really appreciate it. So shout out to Aaron Weston, Amy Tess, Chris George, and Claire Feeney. You guys we really appreciate supporting the podcast, and hopefully you enjoy the content we put out there, even though the Orioles continue to lose.
And we'll be breaking down the struggles for the Orioles and what led to Brandon Hyde's dismissal with a longtime beat writer who's been covering the Orioles. You can now read his work at Substack at steveonbaseball.substack.com. We're happy to have him back on. He's Steve Melewski. Steve, how are you?
I am doing all right, guys. It's been quite a few days in Birdland, hasn't it?
It has been. And what was your reaction to that news when it dropped on Saturday morning that the Orioles were moving on from Brandon Hyde?
It was surprising in some respects and not in others. And I mean, for me, it kind of fell under the do something category. It just reached a critical mass for the management of the team. The team's been underperforming. I mean, last year they were swept 3-game series 3 times. Now they've been swept 4 times in 7 series. So, I mean, we keep saying, is this rock bottom? And the Orioles keep topping it, unfortunately. So hopefully they're reaching that point where things will start to get better. So I think they had to do something, and that something cost a good man his job. I was a big fan of Brandon Hyde. He was great to me personally, but I was a fan of his work because I remember the first year when he managed the team, 2019, I went to spring training, and young players were practically tackling me in the clubhouse in Sarasota to tell me how great this new guy was for young players. He was letting them be themselves. He was encouraging, if you're loud in the clubhouse, be loud. If you're quiet, be quiet. If you like to steal, go steal. If you like to play us with a certain flair, do that. And he really let them be themselves. And he was that rare manager, as you guys know, who saw all those losses, but then was there when they won. So they didn't win a World Series. They didn't even win a playoff series or a game on his watch, but they did win the AL East. There were times in 2016, 17, 18, when we thought that we'd never see that day again, and we did. So, but this year, it took them down. And so now they go on without Brandon Hyde.
The other part of this, I guess I want to start here and breaking down what happened with Brandon Hyde, because I think you're right. It got to a point where the Orioles felt like they had to do something. Did you think, go back a few weeks when Mike Elias gave some positive public comments about Hyde. Did you think when you heard those at the time that Hyde was safe, maybe until at least the All-Star break, and that he'd be given more time to turn this around? Or did you still have that sense that maybe if the team continued to struggle the way that it has, that he would be let go?
I thought those two men were joined at the hip, and I thought they were going to see this season through. And it's been pointed out that some managers in a similar situation, they kept them and they turned it around, like Davey Martinez and the Nationals in 2019, very different roster team makeup than this Oriole team, more veteran team then. And I did believe, and I think when he said those words, Mike Elias believed, I'm sticking with Brandon Hyde, but that, things evolve and things change. And I don't think he thinks any less of them the day they made this move. But clearly to me now, it puts Mike front and center. These two men were getting this raft of criticism, and now one is gone, one is left. So it's kind of all falling on Elias at this point. He obviously didn't have a great winter, and so a lot of his moves have not panned out. And, he has said repeatedly, I'm responsible for this. And I think fans are letting him know that he is. So I'm surprised. Yes, Zach, they fired Brandon Hyde. Surprised me. But again, I think it reached do something stage. That Friday night, that was rough. And, how many, there's been repeated nights like that. If it was an outlier, it'd be different, but there've been too many nights like Friday.
Bob, I want to pull you in here because I know that on our show in the last few weeks, you had been pretty vocal about your dissatisfaction with Brandon Hyde. And I know that you and Nick were busy on Saturday, so you couldn't join me to break down the news when it first happened. So what have been your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, and it wasn't like I thought Brandon Hyde was the reason the team was struggling, because obviously did a great job. I think it was a huge reason why the team overachieved in 2022 and 2023. To me, it just seemed like there was no answers, even in the post-game press conferences, the questions. He's like, I don't know what else I can do. And I just thought, you need to change the energy, the injuries. You're already behind on that. The bad luck, the batted ball, batting average for balls on play, the umpires, everything else. And when we were like 5 or 6 games under 500, I thought you might want to pull that cord just to hopefully pull yourselves out of, spark something, get something going in the other direction before the hole got too big. Unfortunately, the hole is too big now, in my opinion. I mean, still keep playing. Hopefully the guys just don't believe that and continue to go out there and just try to chip away at the hole that they've dug themselves into. But yeah, I'm very grateful for what Brandon Hyde has done for the Orioles in this era of baseball. And I still think there's a very bright future for this core of players and prospects in front office. But, you get one mulligan, and unfortunately, he had to pay the cost of a very, very disappointing season. But, I think this should at least be a wake-up call. And obviously, the players, they're going out there, they're doing their own thing. I don't think this is going to necessarily change how hard they're playing. I think they were already going out there and playing hard. And the issues that were affecting the offense, which we thought was going to be great, they're still affecting the offense. They've got to figure that out first and foremost, which I know, and I'm sure that they're working on. But yeah, I think there just has to be repercussions when you're 15 games under 500 2 months into the season. It's unfortunate reality, but Brandon Hyde, he's going to bounce back. He'll be a manager for someone again, and I think he'll be a good one, as he was here.
Yeah, I think he does have a chance to manage again. And some media I was talking to at the ballpark this weekend said, boy, in the early days of his tenure, if we had said that, you'd have said probably not likely if he doesn't work out here. But I think he did some good things that he will get perhaps another look. Maybe he has to re-enter the game as a bench coach or something for a year or two. But I think somebody might take a shot at him. And, the one thing that you guys have probably seen it, I see it all the time with Birdland. And I tell players this, if fans can't see you outwardly emotional, they don't believe you are inwardly emotional. I had a long chat with Cedric Mullins about this about 2 weeks ago. And I said, Cedric, anybody who's watched you play knows you play with flair and passion and intensity and desire. But you don't show it very often. We don't see it. And I said, but we know it's there because we know you well enough to know this guy's got it, or else how's he diving in the gap every night for that ball. So, and I think Hyde had that. Ask Robbie Ray the night that Hyde aired him out. Ask the Yankee dugout the night Hyde wanted to take them all on. He's fiery, but he didn't always show it. And so I think some fans thought he's resigned to losing or he's phoning it in or why doesn't he call them out? But no managers call out their team or players anymore. It's just so rare. I was talking to someone tonight, and I said, in Earl Weaver's day, Mike Flanagan told me Earl used to walk up and down the dugout before he pitched saying, need 8 runs tonight, guys. That's how he felt he needed to motivate Mike Flanagan. No manager would do that today. But Earl Weaver did it oftentimes when Mike Flanagan pitched, and Mike said, I'm going to show you, and he did. And so it's just different. I think Hyde and the players, that fire burns, but when you lose every night, no team ever looks good losing. We never watch a team 10 games under and go, wow, look at those guys. So, I mean, maybe in the early days of the Orioles rebuild, we did because they played so hard for Hyde, but we knew then they were going to lose and they were outmatched. And that's the disappointing of this season. So it came down right now on one guy, but over weeks and months, it may sweep up others.
Yeah. And it's interesting. A big reason I wanted to have you on here before the Hyde news, I invited you on here because we're seen and are a half glass full podcast. We just look at, we're looking for the positives in the minor leagues, and we're just generally positive people. I know you are as well. So how has that been for you to be in such a disappointing season when I know I've thought, there's a chance they're going to get right back into it, pull themselves out, and they keep losing. How has that been on you this year?
It has been an interesting few weeks for me because my contract was not renewed by Masson. What am I going to do? I'm looking at several things. There's no great opportunity just falling at my feet, and I knew that would be the case. And so I sort of started over, if you will, on Substack, realizing it's a big buildup there. You guys are on Substack, and we both, like each other's sites and so forth. And you guys have been supportive of me. I really appreciate that. And so I found a lot of fans keep finding me, and I like that, but it took off like a rocket, and it sort of slows down a little bit. And so I'm in that phase right now where I'm kind of processing everything too. My career, my work, and all that. I love what I'm doing, and I really feel it'll be positive. But the season takes its toll on all of us. I love the Orioles, man. I've loved the Orioles since I walked into Memorial Stadium at age 6. So when things are not going well, it bothers me as a fan of the team. And like I told some of my friends recently, sometimes they talk about the players in a manner. I'm like, man, I can't call a guy a piece of you-know-what like you did. I said, I like that guy. I know those guys. I heard for them that they're having a tough time, and I care about those players. And frankly, some of them care about me. So many of them do. So, I mean, it's personal for me. This is more than business. This is more than reporting. And so I feel bad for the fans of Birdland who are great fans. People are paying money to get my work right now. I mean, I'm just so honored by that. So I feel bad for all of us because we're all impacted in different ways. And it hurt, in the media, what we do at a podcast or writing, when things aren't going well, there's less eyeballs on those materials. So that impacts everything. So, yeah, the whole thing right now, it stinks. And so hopefully those guys who I care about and I still believe in will show us they're better than they look right now.
Yeah, and the good thing is the beauty of baseball, there is still 4 months to play. And maybe now we get to see, if we were half glass full, now the glass is empty, right? So we got to, you find a way to fill it back up. Kobe Mayo could potentially come up, get a real run at trying to establish himself. Samuel Basayo, who we'll talk about a little bit, maybe he will. Dylan Beavers, some of these young pitchers like Chase McDermott and Brandon Young, when he's healthy, hopefully can get some innings in looking towards next year. So the beauty of baseball is there's always hope just around the corner too.
And I believe the Orioles window is not closing because this season stinks so bad right now. I look at 2026 and I say it could be completely different. I'm not ready to think about 2026 right now. I'm still digging in 2025, and let's see, a lot more has to play out. And I get it that it's a long shot, that it'll be fun in the second half, or we might be diverted more towards minor league coverage or things that will really keep us going. The draft, which I know you guys do a great job of covering. So there are things to keep us going as fans, to keep us going as reporters, to keep us going as media, and we'll be all right with that. But right now, everything stinks and everything sucks, and it feels like, we haven't hit rock bottom because when you get 15 under, you can be 16. So it's like, holy heck, man, enough is enough already. But I believe you watch Jackson Holiday get better. You see some things happening. You realize Holiday and Gunnar are going to be your double play combination next year too. Hopefully Jordan Westberg's healthy at a corner then, hitting like we've seen him hit, and things are better. I just think their window is not closing because a season may be closing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, not by a long shot, because I still believe in this core. Two of the core players, Kowser and Westberg, are on the injured list. So plus Grayson Rodriguez, Kyle Bradish, etc. But yeah, I think we're in agreement there that it's hopefully just a blip on the radar, but there's the window is definitely not closed.
That is a good segue to talk about Mike Elias, because I think that in his position, it's really up to him to make sure that window stays open for as long as possible. That's something he has talked about repeatedly over the years, including this year. Steve, you kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the show. I think even if Mike Elias continues to be the general manager of the Orioles, some things are going to have to change. Some things in his process may have to be fine-tuned or evolved because of what has happened this year. So what do you see as his status with this team right now?
We don't know that because we don't truly know what the only man above him in the food chain is thinking. And it's more than Rubenstein. He's got a whole group of people that run that team and own that team with him. So he's not a lone voice here, but he's a pretty big voice, right? And he hasn't told us. But as I said to someone the other day, well, Mike Elias was a huge fan of Brandon Hyde until I guess he wasn't. And David Rubenstein seems to be a big fan of Mike Elias, but that doesn't mean there's an unending shelf life on that. So Mike is on the firing line right now. He's on the hot seat. And again, some of these moves are looking really bad right now. The Trevor Rogers trade, great. If you graded it today, oh my gosh, be a horrible grade for the Orioles. Kyle Stowers, I always was a fan of his. And I told someone 2 years ago, Santander's going to walk out the door and Stowers is going to walk in the door, and they're not going to miss a beat. I really felt that. And he looks like he's playing like that now. I'm a big believer in that kid. So these are deals that a couple of them happen. They could change the course of things and not in a good way for the Orioles. So Mike is on the hot seat right now. I'm sure I'm not telling him anything he doesn't know. And we have to see how it goes from here. He took them to 101 wins in the AL East faster than we thought, with almost no payroll. And so it seemed like everything was setting up for the next step. But the Orioles got to the 15-yard line and they fumbled the ball here. So can they get, to use a football terminology, can they get it back and get in the end zone? Right now, there are a lot of people betting against that. But there probably were some betting against them when they were losing 108 games too.
Yeah, I kind of feel for him because the process, I feel like, was right. We understood all the moves that were made in the offseason. Obviously, you make a great offer. It comes out for Corbin Burns. He was never signing here. They tried for Blake Snell, other players, but we understood why you would want to bring Charlie Morton in for 1 year. We didn't know he was going to, pitch the way he has. Tyler O'Neill, thought that was a good signing. He's been hurt. So, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, whether it's injuries, whether it's bad luck with batted balls, or whether it's umpires. I feel like the Orioles get screwed the worst, at least based on those little umpire grades that come out on Twitter and stuff. So it just seems like a one percentile outcome this season, unfortunately. And he said it himself. He's the guy that put the team together, so it falls on his shoulders. And we know that they are willing to evolve their process as they get new information in. So, we'll see what happens if it comes down to at what point do you hang on to guys like Jorge Mateo, Cionel Perez, who are underperforming, but you still like ultimately their skills. But maybe when you're in a contention window and you're trying to make the World Series, you can better utilize those roster spots. I'm not sure. I don't have the answers, but yeah, it's a tough year for everybody involved, and you just gotta take the information you got and move forward from here.
I hope the Orioles look at everything and tweak everything, whether it's seemingly something small that may not be small, how they construct their lineups. Clearly, they believe in platoon, left, right, extracting every platoon advantage. And stats will show you that for a while it was going really well. The Orioles were doing well with that strategy, but it's no longer working. So the other day when they had three lefties at the top, 1, 2, 3, I thought, hey, great. Maybe they've told Mancelino, you know what? We love the data and analytics. We love to look at lineups a certain way. But if it's in your gut that tonight this is how we're going to win this game, go do it. I mean, I hope he was told that. I don't know. I don't really know. People have asked, and I don't know how much autonomy Brandon Hyde had in some of these decisions. I think probably more than we think he had, okay? But I also think he realized I'm going to manage the roster the way it was constructed. So I'm not going to have my general manager make all these moves and I say, oh, I'm not going to play Laureano against lefty pitching. I know you signed him to hit lefties, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, come on. So you got to be in concert. So I think Brandon may not have always made the move his gut would have told him to make, but he maybe made the move that the organization feels strongly about. So I think the Orioles got to look at all this. They got to look at Braxton Bragg's throwing 70 pitches. Well, what if he gave him 85? What would that mean? What if we let him face the lineup a third time? What might that mean in Baltimore in a year or two? What about we have 3 draft picks in the top 31? It's time to take a college pitcher with one of those 3 who might help us next year. Oh, by the way. So these are things the Orioles haven't done so far, but maybe they should begin to do.
Yeah, maybe in this offseason, you get out of your comfort zone a little bit and make an offer for a year or 2 more than you would typically, because you have to overpay to get guys to come to Baltimore.
And maybe that's where Rubenstein really makes an impact, because it's been pointed out over the years that sometimes a general manager at a various spot may not have wanted to do the contract he eventually did. But behind him was an owner saying, you know what, we need to do this. And maybe you're looking at all the data and the numbers and the dollars. You feel it's not the move, but I think we should do it. Go do it. Here's $300 million. Get that guy. And so maybe that's where Rubenstein comes in and says, Mike, we need to win one of these deals on a pitcher. We need to get Max Fried next time or get Garrett Crochet next time. And so if we have to go further than is your comfort zone, maybe that's what we have to do. And again, I'm speculating. Who knows? Maybe it was Elias who said, I need $100 million more. And Rubenstein said no. Or maybe it was the other way around. Rubenstein said, why don't you give him $350? And Mike said, oh my God, no way would I do that. So who knows what was said, But I think the 2 men together, when this comes up again and they can go the extra mile for that pitcher, maybe it's time to do that.
Well, and I think that there's a fine line there too, because the reputation that Peter Angelo's had over the years was meddling too much with the baseball operations department and sometimes weakening it. But I think what you bring up, Steve, is a good point, which is that maybe sometimes you need an owner who's going to give a general manager a nudge to step out of their comfort zone a little bit and can do so without completely taking everything over.
Yeah, because it might not be meddling per se to just say, I know you feel this is your comfort zone. I'm telling you, I'm footing the rest of that bill that's over your comfort zone. So it's not really meddling. It's more saying, You like this guy to a limit. Well, take the limit away.
Exactly. And so, I'm sure Mike has a lot of graphs and data and bars and values and models that he can look at that say that dollar amount for Max Fried was not going to work for us because our market is not New York. But at some point, you've got to win one of those battles. And at some point, the Orioles have to stop acquiring 1-year pitchers. Jordan Lyles, then Kyle Gibson, then Corbin Burns. He's come, he goes. They got to have some good, maybe Zach Eflin is the guy that maybe in the second half they go to him and say, let's talk about doing something for a year or 2 down the road. Maybe Sagano pitches so well that they say, we want you for another 2 years, buddy. But then you still got to go bigger and better than that. You can't just win. The Orioles kind of won the East without really an ace pitcher, although I guess Bradish pitched like one, obviously. So they didn't, on paper, have a number 1, and they won. But you can't always do that.
Exactly. The lot went right that year. They had a good offense. They had the best closer in the game and a very good bullpen to get the ball to him most nights. And while they lacked an ace, they were pretty solid 1 through 5. And I felt like that was the formula Mike Elias was trying to get back to this year, knowing that he was not going to be able to get an ace, and it just hasn't worked.
Right. It hasn't. And so if it's not working, do something different, right? And I think Mike Elias, obviously we know he's a smart guy. And we also know he's a smart baseball guy. He's book smart and he's baseball smart. And I think he's portrayed sometimes as he sits there with his spreadsheet and, if it tells him what to do, he doesn't have to think the move. It just spits out what I should do here. And maybe some of that is true at sometimes, but I also think he knows baseball. And so if given the chance, we're going to see if he is now that the Orioles have made one major move. Will there be others later? Who knows? But if given the chance, I do believe he still could get this thing to the goal line. But doing it as they've done it, it's going to take some tweaks, some adjustments. At some point, they're going to have to throw big dollars at a player. And they just have to do it. They can't do it at 3 or 4, right? Because that'll sink the team if it doesn't work out. The Yankees can, the Orioles can't. So that's one reason fans always should keep in mind why they just don't randomly throw around $300 million deals, because one or two that go haywire could really mess things up for a team with the bottom line as the Orioles have. I call them a mid-market team. I don't know what the books say or the television ratings or all of that. I don't see them as ever being those top 4 or 5 payroll teams, but they should never be the bottom 4 or 5 unless it's a rebuild, and that's what happens. But I always think middle of the pack or a little above that is a good place for the Orioles and could be, sustainable for the franchise with where they are as their market.
Yeah, I think mid-market is fair. And look, it wasn't just the fans that this offseason didn't go according to plan. I doubt that the front office this offseason went as according to their plans. And it seemed like they couldn't get the impact guys they wanted. So they thought, all right, we can pick off some one-year deals for guys that will reset the books, go into the next offseason. So they kind of like push it back a little bit. And maybe the silver lining is, look, well, they seem like they tried to build up the depth, which injuries crushed even that. And then they wanted to boost the lineup against left-handed pitching. Well, the Orioles are the worst hitting lineup against lefties in all of baseball. O'Neill and Sanchez are hurt. Laureano's been great, but surprisingly against right-handed pitching. So maybe a silver lining to all this is that you do have guys on expiring deals. We know this team, obviously we'll give them a little more time, but you're probably going to be sellers at the deadline. You can trade some of these guys. You could trade a Zach Eflin and then re-sign him in the offseason, bring him back for a 3-year deal.
Exactly.
So maybe the silver lining is they get one more really high draft pick. They can kind of restock the farm system a little bit this year, and the core is still really strong, in my opinion. So
mine too.
Always looking for the silver linings.
I want to talk about Tony Manzolino for a moment, because I think everyone had expected that it would be a member of the coaching staff that would replace Brandon Hyde if he was let go mid-season. But Manzolino was not the name that was speculated the most. Buck Britton's name, because of his years in the minor leagues, was brought up. It seems like a lot of people around the game, not just in Baltimore, believe that Robinson Chirinos will be a major league manager in one day, and it's just a matter of him paying his dues. But the Orioles go with Manzolino, who's been part of this coaching staff for a long time and has done a lot of really important work with the infielders. And Steve, just what background do you have on Manzolino, just having been around him for the last few years? What kind of coach and what kind of leader can he be?
I think we truly don't know. And I certainly don't know Manzolino anyway, we're near as well as a new Hyde, because we see the manager twice a day. And over years, you just get to know those guys and the coaches. In the media, we might go weeks without talking or even seeing some of the guys. I said to somebody the other day, "You sure Buck Britton works here?" I never see Buck. Now, I know that's because Buck is working hard behind the scenes, but you don't see him a lot. The coaches are not in the clubhouse a lot when the media is in there. I'm sure they're in there a lot when we're gone. So we're going to find that out. For what it's worth, and granted, not very much, I did look today to double check this guy's minor league managing record, and he was at 4 levels in Cleveland: A ball in 16, high A 17, double A 18, triple A 19. Each year they won. 2 of the 4 years they won the championship. and he's got like 57% winning percentage in the minors. That's hard to do. You guys know, because you never know what roster you're getting. Now, maybe he benefited from Tristan McKenzie, Justin Bieber. Some of those guys were on those teams, so he benefited from future major league pitchers as they moved up. He did. And Tony would probably tell you the same thing. Vanderbilt guy, so there's a guy from a great college baseball program. And, of course, his dad means so much to him, still works for the Atlanta Braves. He just seems to me like a great baseball guy. And while some fans, again, and media were critical of some of his early interviews, I saw sincerity. I saw a guy being who he is, not grabbing talking points or looking for some public relations help, just saying what he thinks. And the first words out of his mouth Saturday was, "This is not a great day." And he felt bad for his friend who brought him to the major leagues. That's human. What's wrong with that? To me, I said, wait, good for you, Tony. Good for you, how you handled that. You showed respect to Brandon Hyde. You showed you're a real person who's hurting today. This is not a day of celebration for him. Surely he knows it's a great opportunity to manage any major league team at any time. But I think he also understands the circumstances stunk that got him to where he is today. But he's a pro, and he's going to be a pro. And I think the Oriole players in time will respond to him. And this staff is close-knit. They're going to band together here now that this has happened and try to, really help each other.
Yeah, I was surprised that it was Manzolino over Buck Britton early, because it seemed like the team was kind of grooming him into a future managerial role. But at the same time, Manzolino's been with this team in the major leagues longer, and maybe they want to give Buck an opportunity to not have the quote unquote stain, potentially, if it continues to go downhill, of 2025. When he gets a chance to interview at the end of the season, Manzolino will get to make his case as well as outside guys, obviously. But I've liked what I've heard from him so far, and I'm curious to see how he does with the role.
I think Tony said it well the other day. He said, Hyde taught me how to be a major league coach, because there's nothing like Major League Baseball. Nothing prepares you for this level of ball and how it happens in the major leagues. And I think throwing Buck into that right now, with the ship kind of sinking a bit, taking on water every night, would have been too much to ask right now. Is Buck a future major league manager? He probably is. He'd probably be a great one. Is Chirinos? He probably is. Is Tony? Maybe Tony's going to be one now that he's given this chance on an interim basis and really show some stuff. So I think that's why it wasn't Buck Britton right now. It's just too much to ask of a first-year coach who hadn't even been around the league yet one time. It's not even Memorial Day. And so he's still figuring out what it's like to be a major league coach. And so the Orioles are a little understaffed here. You look at all the coaches all these teams have, and essentially they're down two, because they moved one to the manager's office and they fired one. So they're really now, we might see an addition or two at some point here over the next few weeks to help that out. And fans say, why do they need all those coaches? Well, look at every staff. And, the Orioles have 3 hitting coaches. So do like 20 other teams. So they're not the outlier here. Look at the program, how they're doing it. And so the Orioles are just following the path of so many others.
We'll go a completely different note now to talk about Samuel Basallo, who really is having a good month so far down in Norfolk. After an IL stint, he has come back hitting well, and he's now back behind the plate after an early season elbow injury limited him to DH and first base duties early in the year. He particularly performed well at the plate last week in the tied series against Jacksonville, hitting 3 home runs, including 2 and 1 game, with 5 hits total in 18 at-bats. So far this season, he's got 7 home runs, goes an .872 OPS. I think that given the circumstances, Basallo is probably going to spend most of this year in Norfolk. But Steve, I want to throw it out to you. We know that as you look ahead to 2026, one big reason for optimism could be Basallo's emergence in the major leagues. Is there a possibility that, with one positive that could come out of the team struggling, is that maybe he gets a little bit more opportunity in the majors late in the year than he otherwise would.
Very, very much could happen. And so at some point, are the Orioles want to cut bait on the Gary Sanchez deal? They gave him $8 million. So that's pretty pricey for 1 year, backup catcher. And they still believe he can hit lefty pitching, but who knows when he's even going to get back in the lineup right now. So the door is open for this kid in the second half, I think. One thing that was incredibly encouraging to me was an interview I did in February with Keith Law, who was more bullish on his defense than any analyst I've ever heard. Keith ranked him third on his top 100 based on defensive potential, which this is Keith's ranking, he said is chance for 55 grade catch and defense. We know the arm could be 70 and has been that. He said at least 70. So he's got that as the floor for the arm. And I've had scouts already tell me he throws better than Adley today. So now that his bullish defensive report, I have not been able to find elsewhere. And I don't find bad defensive reports. I just don't find them as bullish as Law's was in February. I don't have scouts telling me, I see 55. They say maybe he can be 50. He's very agile for a big guy. He really has great acumen for the game. He wants to be a good catcher. When I've interviewed this kid, and I think I told you guys before, he wants to be a good catcher, and he is fueled by those who say he won't. He loves that. He wants to hear that. So we know we're not worried about his offense, right? Let's see how it does when the time comes, but we know he can rake. So can he be adequate defensively? It seems like there are some more people saying yes to that. And all along, the Oriole minor league people have told me I keep, hey, you're going to move him to first. Steve, he's a catcher. So I told fans that. I said, they keep telling me he's a catcher. Will you guys calm down about this? And so I think he's been pretty good back there. And now I think Fedorovich, major league catcher, was put in Norfolk for many reasons, one of which was to mentor this kid and get him to the big leagues and help him. So they put the pairing together, and now that he's finally catching, they get to work on it.
Yeah, he's been everything that I think the Orioles could have hoped for offensively, and he's got that combination of growth mindset where he wants to get better desperately, similar to how Gunnar Henderson was when he was coming up, but also just the raw skills at 20 years old. He's got 80 grade power right now. Baseball America just came out with an article that said that his, I think it was like in the air, average exit velocity is 80 grade in the major leagues right now. I think he gets underrated a little bit just because the Orioles had so many number one prospects overall that they kind of got burnt out a little bit, but maybe I'm wrong, but I'm incredibly high on Basayo. I would love to see them maybe say, typically we would save him for September, save his rookie of the year eligibility for 2026. But with this losing season, I would love to see them just bring him up post deadline. If you could maybe a team could take a flyer on Gary Sanchez for something, you bring him up for the last 2 months of the season with the idea that you're going to extend this guy. So you don't really need to worry about service time. You're going to extend him for 10 plus years and keep him home. I would love to see that, but yeah, most likely he'll just, get the Gunnar Henderson.
You're probably right about that, Bob, because, okay, maybe he gets your draft pick next year, but those 30 or 40 games jump starting 2026. And if he's going to be on the 2026 team from opening day on, he might be a regular player, whether it's catch, DH, first base, whatever you need him. Just get him in the lineup and we'll figure out what spot he's in. And Adley's, with his subpar play, has opened the door here for this kid. I don't know if he's going to blow by Adley Rutschman, but Adley is playing so subpar right now that if this kid's better in the short and maybe even long term, the Orioles have to be open to that possibility, and I think they probably will be.
And with that, now we will go into our final segment of the night. Last call brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located 1421 Ridley Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And while you're at the ballpark this season, you can get one of Checker Spot's signature beers, the Bird is the Word, at the beer stand behind home plate. And for our last call prompt tonight, I'm going to bring up a question that I had on Saturday, and that was, to our listeners, but now I'm going to bring Bob and Steve into this as well, which is, what does success look like to you the rest of the way this season? And I reviewed some of the questions or some of the answers that we got from our listeners before tonight's show, and I was pleasantly surprised by the nuance in those answers over on our Discord. A lot of people just wanting to see the Orioles play cleaner baseball night in, night out. A lot of people just wanting to see the young players get the opportunity to play in the major leagues and get better. Just having players come back off the IL. So I think tempering expectations, but not going overboard at the same time and completely writing off this season. So thank you for those answers. And now I'll turn it over, starting with Steve. What does success look like to you the rest of the way?
Well, if you're aiming for the high end of the bar here, it's somehow get into contention. Yes, that seems very unlikely. And start doing the math, it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like you make it. But that's still what you're aiming for, I think, when you're not even at Memorial Day. But individual success stories, right? Get Jordan Westburg back playing like the Orioles know he can. Try to get Adley right here. Adley, start swinging at the first pitch, kid. Do something different. And I'm not – if it's my team, I'm not batting Adley third or fourth every night until he earns the right to be there. I'm moving him down and saying, kid, just relax, go play, show what you can do. And get some things right here. Kate Povich, you were so great in September. Why the inconsistency now? Get him going. Get, like you said, McDermott or Young. Get one of these guys up here. Jackson Holiday, you're 780 OPS. Can you push it to 800? Gunner, can you start driving in runs like we know you can? We got to give you more runners in scoring position opportunities because Gunner actually gets fewer than most. I saw a stat today on that. So all these little things would add up to bigger things that I think Oriole fans like.
Yeah, I think for me, it's you got to be able to hit that fastball. They did it in the first half of 2024. They were crushing fastballs. It seems like lately they're looking breaking ball and then they can't catch up to the fastball. I don't know why they're not hitting a fastball, but I feel like just figure out the approaches, the aggressiveness, whatever the hitting mix needs to happen, because these guys are too talented to continue to have, like Ryan Mountcastle, like we bagged on him a little bit just because we thought he was like an average, slightly above average first baseman that you could improve on, but he's not a guy that should have like a 600 OPS right now. You just try to figure out what's going on with the hitting, continue to develop your young guys, just start getting healthy. Cowser, Westberg, Grayson, Bradish, Wells, allow these guys to come back, get healthy, and build their innings back up for 2026. Find a way to get Kobe Mayo an extended run of consistent at bats to try to establish himself, and just let the young guys play. I mean, for a while, you're going to have to see the veterans continue to play to build up trade value, or just because you're paying them, you're going to play them. You're still trying to win games, but eventually the kids have to get their innings, get their at bats, and for me, it's just play better. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, I don't really care what the record is at the end of the day, as long as we have some positive momentum going into the offseason to give us a reason to be hopeful for 2026, which I am anyway, but I want to see it on the field.
Yeah, I agree. And if you wanted to put a number behind that, I think if the Orioles even went a couple of games above 500 in the second half, most people would take that as a win, especially if you had Kyle Bradish coming back healthy in 2026. And a lot of the players that have struggled at this point start to pick up momentum. For me, I just want to see fewer games where it feels like they're out of it in the third inning. That, I think, has been a huge problem this year, is that they get down so early and the players just look exhausted by the fourth inning. And it's like, well, they're either the starting pitcher gets lit up in the first or second inning and they're already into their bullpen, or their starting pitcher's having to wear it. Or if they are pitching well, the bats just aren't coming through. They're not coming through as runners in scoring position. For me, it's just start getting ahead of teams early in games, or at least play within a run or so. And if they could start doing that more often, I think that the psyche behind this team is going to be a lot better. So that's really, I think, the first goal for me, and let everything else come after that. It's just play close early on more often and stop with the big innings right out of the gate.
Yeah. They got to find momentum somewhere. I thought they found it in the Angels series. I know they beat a bad team, but I thought they were going to come home and have a better homestand. That didn't work out. So it's somewhere along the line. You got to win a couple series in a row. And then even if you drop one or two, get right back to winning, where you look up and go, wow, they won 5 of the last 8 series. They hadn't done that all year. Maybe finally they're trending up. And then like you said, you look up in a month or two and let's see where you're at. Is it doable at all? Is it a pipe dream? You know, one thing for guys like us that love the draft is now you can't quote unquote tank for a high pick, because they don't do it that way anymore. There's a draft lottery. So even if the Orioles don't make the playoffs, they will be in the lottery, and miracles happen. Just happened in the NBA, where a team that seemingly has no shot to get a high pick could get one. So even the Orioles don't have to lose 100 games to get a high draft pick. They just have to miss postseason, and they have a shot to get a higher draft pick.
Yeah, and for these players, I want them to take from this year that they never want to feel this way again, and they never want to be on a team that is this disappointing again, and maybe play pissed off. Maybe that will, go out there, play pissed off, and just, I don't know. Losing is learning. You learn from your losses, and they're doing plenty of learning so far this year.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for bringing your insight to the show tonight. Can you tell our listeners before you go a little bit about what you have over at your Substack now, and what you're going to be working on here for the rest of the season?
Well, thank you guys for letting me mention this. Yes, I'm on Substack, and I do really enjoy the multimedia capabilities. I'm not, as you guys all know, the most technically driven media guy. So I've had to have a lot of help from a lot of people to get me to this point. But steveonbaseball.substack.com is where you can find me. And Oriole fans, I love them so much. Even with the season going south, they keep finding me and keep adding to what I got going there. So very excited, fingers crossed that this thing keeps building. And so I write daily articles. I have the game blog that we do in game. I've taken it over to Substack now. So there's 2 or 3 articles a day, most days. It's mostly free content. There is some paid only that I also do for the people who have been nice enough to support my work in that manner. We have videos I do. I've done some live videos. I did one with John Eisenberg not long ago, who of course is on Substack with the Bird tapes. He has a great site. And so also I promised and finally got a podcast going now too. Mine's audio only, unlike you guys, but I usually release a new episode every Thursday. This week is going to be a must listen. My good buddy, Jacob Calvin Meyer, the Baltimore Sun, will talk about the last week in Birdland. There's a lot to talk about, and he will be on this Thursday. And I had Jim Callis on last week, gave great insights on the draft. I've had Peter Schmuck. I had Vance Honeycutt has already been on the podcast, Kobe Perez, and we're just going to keep building great guests, giving insight on baseball. And I don't make it timely, because people might listen to it a week after you recorded it, right? Or 2 or 3 weeks. So we're trying to make it interesting, fun, informative, but it's not necessarily an analysis of last night's game so much because of the nature of a podcast. But I love that I've got one now. I've been getting a ton of downloads, hits. I'm still learning how what's good there and all that. And so, but the fans have been finding it, man. So keep supporting me there at steveonbaseball.substack.com. And thank you guys for letting me plug it.
You're welcome. Thank you, as always, for joining us. And that does it for this show. Bob and I are going to be back later on this week to break down the injury news about Patrick Riley, who underwent Tommy John surgery last week. But we will have some positive news, including the dominant performance of Trey Gibson last week and how he continues to surge up the prospect ranks. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. You will have access to bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. For Bob Phil and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve. That was great.
Thank you guys. That's fun.
Yeah.
How's the Patriot thing work out? Is that a good thing?
Yeah. Yeah. We get a lot of
That's
support over
different
there.
from your Substack?
Yeah. Yeah. We tend to do a lot of the free stuff on the Substack for our writing, but the Patreon it's been nice. They get some bonus stuff, and it's a good community that's built up over there.
So that's people supporting your podcast only here, your video podcast.
Yeah, well, a little bit of everything, but yeah, mainly that. And then they get access to the Discord, which is like a message board type thing.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I might have to look at some of that stuff. And it's like, I don't want to over commercialize what I'm doing. I don't want people going, well, I paid you here. You want me to pay you here? What are you doing? Like the podcast, I've gotten some that got 400, 500, 700 downloads. And when I read online, that sounds like a lot. So I don't know
about right, yeah.
if there's monetization opportunities or what I should be doing. But if there's anything you young guys know a lot more about this stuff than I do. So feel free to point me in the right direction or suggest something if you see something you think could help. And I've been lucky, man. Birdland has been helping out. People have been jumping on. I'll be like, man, you have days you're like, I could use a couple of subscribers, and I scroll over. I'm like, wow, look, 5 more people.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy fans you see on the radio shows and on Twitter, but there's also a lot of great Orioles fans out there that really are supportive.
Aren't we lucky that that's true? And they're not all like the message board or the Twitter crowd. Thank God, because it can feel like that's all we got out there. But I can see, I can put a tweet out that's a negative tweet, and it'll get 1/10 of the interaction. Jackson Holiday's batting 400 in his last 10 games. It gets. So people are just thirsty for good stuff. So hopefully these guys will give us some good stuff to talk about.
We can only hope.
Well, thanks, guys. Good luck with everything, and call me anytime.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
See you, fellas. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined by Bob Phil, and our co-host Nick Stevens is out this week. On tonight's show, we're going to break down some injury news. As Pat Riley underwent Tommy John surgery last week. It's not all bad, though, on the pitching front, because Trey Gibson has continued to improve gradually over the course of the 2025 season and is really starting to make a case that after Nestor Herman recently made the jump to Double-A, that he should be next in line. So we'll get into that on tonight's show, but I'll start, Bob, just some reflection on our conversation with Steve Melewski earlier this week, reacting to the news of Brandon Hyde's dismissal as Orioles manager. What were your thoughts on Steve's reaction to that and on our conversation with him?
No, yeah, I thought it was a good processing moment for us, or me especially. But yeah, I liked what Steve had to say. Obviously, he's interacted with Brandon Hyde a lot more. I completely understand the personal connection there. Hey, yeah, it sucks. It sucks for everybody involved. But I thought Steve had some good things to say, and I agree with him. The window is not closed, not by a long shot, but doesn't make it any less disappointing.
Absolutely. And if you've not had a chance to listen to that interview yet, be sure to check that out. And next week, our plan is when we have Nick back on the air, we're going to talk a little bit more about Mike Elias and his whole process. In fact, that was initially what we were going to talk about on this show, but we wanted to hold off on that until all 3 of us can be on the air. It gives us more time to discuss what is going on in the minor leagues. And the Orioles did get some bad but not unexpected news last week when Patrick Riley underwent Tommy John surgery. So Riley had been at Double-A Chesapeake's rotation beginning of this year, put together back-to-back nice starts to begin the season, but then lasted just 1 inning in his start at Richmond on April 19th. It was reported at the time that he had forearm issues, and although it did not become official until last week, and in fact, there was very little information out there until last week, we know that when issues with the elbow or the forearm come up, that there is always the possibility of Tommy John surgery, and that is indeed what happened with Riley. And Riley, just to give a little bit of background for listeners that don't know or need to be reminded of this, he was drafted by the Pirates in the 5th round out of Vanderbilt in the 2023 draft, and then came over to the Orioles last year in the trade that sent Billy Cook to the Pirates, a rare prospect for prospect deal that had been working out very well for the Orioles up to this point, because Riley pitched well at Double-A to end last season and came into this year as one of the organization's top pitching prospects, and showed that in the very short time before the injury. So, Bob, it's disappointing. It goes without words to say that, but what is your reaction to this news?
Yeah, it's like you say. I mean, it just sucks. We knew pretty quickly that once we heard it was forearm and then there was radio silence, it's like, okay, just waiting, counting down the days till we heard the news. And then obviously we did. Yeah, I don't know. It's just part of the game at this point. Like it sucks. It's disappointing, but at the same time, hey, we'll see him second half of 2026, and hopefully he can get right for the 2027 season. He'll start in AAA Norfolk and continue his development. I don't think it's a death sentence. Yeah, obviously, it sucks because this is the year of the pitcher injury. Last year was the year of the pitcher. This is the year of the pitcher injury. But yeah, it's unfortunate because I really liked what we were seeing from him post trade, and especially to start off this year. So yeah, hopefully has a successful surgery and can get back as soon as possible and back on the mound.
It's worth pointing out that Riley came into the season age 23. He'll turn 24 in October. So this is not a guy that's, 26, 27 years old having this injury. There is still plenty of time for him to turn around. You just have to hope that it will go as smoothly as it can. We know sometimes it's Tommy John surgery. It doesn't always work out that way. John Means being an example of the worst case scenario, but the Orioles did get Felix Bautista back from injury. From what we know so far, everything in Kyle Bradis' rehab is going okay. So hopefully it's going to be a smooth or as smooth a rehab process as you can get for Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. And Edgar Portes, I think, has also been ruled out for the season, which maybe that explains his struggles this year. Maybe that has something to do with it, but unfortunate for a guy that we really liked all the way through last year.
Yeah, Portes, more tough injury news there for Chesapeake. And we don't know what Portes' injury is at this point. That roster move was announced on Monday. And just to give some background on Portes so far this season, the numbers had been pretty disappointing. And after basically being stretched out as a starter for the last few years, he was in a lot of short relief outings. And he was struggling in those short relief outings. And I was hoping that maybe he would either adapt to that routine or that this was just the Orioles' way of trying to build him up early in the year when they had a lot of arms down at Double-A. But he never could quite get it going before the injury.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because I thought he piggybacked Cameron Weston a lot early on last year in Aberdeen before Weston got promoted to Double-A. And also, just real quick, shout out to Cameron Weston, who's looked really, really good his last couple times out for Norfolk. So there were times when I'm like, dang, Portes looks just as good as Weston stuff-wise. Obviously, it didn't translate to Double-A, but there's a lot of reasons that could have been. It's just, that's the prospect game. It's boom or bust.
Well, and I will say that it feels like Chesapeake has been especially unlucky with injuries early in the year because they lose arguably their best position player in Enrique Bradfield Jr. I don't even know that's arguable best position player. Riley goes down with an injury. Alex Pham goes down with an injury. We still don't know the extent of Pham's injury yet. But as we just talked about here, Portes goes down with an injury. Zach Fruit is out with what is not expected to be a long-term injury, but again, a bit of a setback for their pitching staff when Fruit was one of the guys that they were counting on to really take a big step forward this year. Yet,
and Levi
somehow the Bay Sox play pretty competitive baseball most nights. It almost feels like all the stuff that is not working for the Orioles has somehow worked for Chesapeake this year. A pitcher will come up from Aberdeen and at least hold their own, or in the case of Braxton Bragg, dominate. And while this is not the strongest lineup by a long shot in the Orioles system, they're at least in the game most nights. And Creed Willems is having the best season of his career so far.
Oh, yeah, easily. I think his stock, I feel like it's underrated how much he's improved his stock, getting those strikeouts down, mostly because the lineup as a whole, like you said, it's pretty anemic. But again, the pitching depth in this organization is so strong that they're just able to pull guys up at will and stay in games, like you said. So yeah, it's been fun to watch, even though, you know, the injuries have ravaged them as well.
Yeah, and we're hoping that Bradfield, we're recording this on Monday night, but we're hoping to see Bradfield perhaps back with the Bay Sox this week, and if
I
not,
would expect
in the
so.
very near future. Yeah, because he's already started his rehab assignment.
Yeah, he got a full week in Aberdeen last week. So I would imagine I was away. I was doing something other than watching baseball on Sunday. So I only saw that he had 2 at-bats and then was replaced in the game. And I was like, uh-oh. He got ejected for arguing balls and strikes. So I think he'll be fine. And yeah, I think he'll be back in Double-A Bowie as soon as tomorrow, I would imagine.
I got to give a guy credit for carrying that much on a rehab assignment.
Right?
He's going to get called,
Yeah.
get ejected for arguing balls and strikes.
Yeah, seriously. that is I do love the fire he brings to the game. And honestly, that might be something the Orioles clubhouse could use as soon as next year.
Yeah, well, and I'm really hoping that Bradfield hits the ground running when he gets back from this injury. And speaking of Aberdeen, talk about Trey Gibson for a moment. Gibson put together the best start of his season last week at Hudson Valley, going 5 1/3 innings, giving up just 1 run on 3 hits with 10 strikeouts against 1 walk. Gibson, if you look at his numbers, there's a lot of things you can quibble with. And I talked about this recently. The walk rate is a little bit high. The ERA has come down some, but still sitting at 5.46%. Yet it seems like he's done a better job in his last few starts at limiting the damage, as in his last 3 appearances, with last week's start included, he has struck out 25 batters while walking to 7 in 14 innings. A lot of Gibson's season so far has been bad luck on batted ball. That has been a real struggle for him this year. But as he flashed last week, when he's on, he has some of the best swing and miss stuff in this organization.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I watched the vast majority of his start that where you're talking about there. I turned it off after 5 innings. I didn't know he was going to go back out there, which I like to see that they were pushing him a little bit more. And then he gave up a home run and then struck out somebody else after that. But yeah, like you said, he's pitched much better than the numbers indicate. The fact that he's striking out 35.6% of batters and walking a little bit less than 10%. His ERA is 5.46, but his xFIP is 2.89. His home run to fly ball ratio is 31.6, and that's just frankly insane. That's outside of a pitcher's control. That's like more than double what is high for a pitcher. So yeah, he looked outstanding in that game that he just pitched in that I watched. He was just landing the breaking ball at the top of the zone all night. Hitters couldn't touch it. And then of course he's flashing 95 about on the fastball as well. I was incredibly impressed, as I was with Nestor Erman, who we'll talk about, as I was with Braxton Bragg this entire year. Like it's been a joy to watch these guys. And that's even with a bunch of guys that we haven't been able to watch, like Luis De Leon. Hopefully he's back. I mean, he's rehabbing with Delmarva, but hopefully he gets a chance to pitch in Bowie this year too. But Gibson, yeah, I think it's easy to forget that. Well, maybe it's not so easy for us to forget, but for like guys that are just like scout or fans that are scouting the stat lines and the box scores, he missed an entire season because he was suspended at Liberty. So, that's going to put yeah, who knows why, but that's going to put a dent in your development a little bit. And the fact that he's been able to catch up to speed this quickly is frankly incredibly impressive. So yeah, he's definitely moving up my list.
If you go back to the beginning of the season when the opening day rosters were announced, it looked like that Aberdeen had at least 3 pitchers, and it really turned out to be 4 with Braxton Bragg. But it looked like Aberdeen had at least 3 pitchers that were going to make an early case for a jump to Double-A. And it was Gibson, Michael Ferret, and Herman. Herman beat both of those guys there. But it feels like with Gibson, it's just kind of a matter of time now, just so that these improvements you made over your last couple of starts are sustainable. And then he could be there. Ferret is out right now as an injury, but that's not expected to be a long-term thing. And I think that with the way he was going before the injury stint, it might have been him and not Herman that went to Double-A last week. So there's a lot of progress in this area of pitching development.
Yeah, I could easily see Ferret being the move if he didn't go down with that. Hopefully, what we suspect is a minor injury, and hopefully he gets back soon, and him and Gibson can compete to be the next guy to go up, because Cohen Aiken's right in that mix too. He's already been up and had some success at Double A. So yeah, it's just really fun right now at that level, high A, Double A of starting pitching prospects. And Levi Wells is going to miss a little bit of time with an abdomen issue. Doesn't seem like it's anything major at all, but he only pitched 1 inning over the weekend, so could be another opportunity for somebody. And yeah, once these guys start getting to Double A, like Armand, and having the success that him and Bragg have had, that's when you really get on a broader radar of prospect hounds, Baseball America, Pipeline, etc. So once these guys start getting to Double A, don't be surprised if they start getting mentioned in top 100 prospect lists very soon.
That's a good point. And I'll go now to Herman, who made his debut at Chesapeake last week. In a start against Akron, he earned a win, his first of the season, by throwing 5 2/3 shutout innings, scattering 4 hits, striking out 6, and walking 2. With that start included, Herman has now struck out 43 batters over 30 2/3 innings pitched this season with 12 walks. But of those 12 walks, half of them came over his first 2 starts in Aberdeen back in April. So he continues what has been an absolutely dominant year for him. Now, I know we talked about him a lot last week when we had John Mioli on, but Bob, what are your thoughts on Herman's Double A debut?
I loved it. Yeah. I, for some reason, wasn't able to stream it on Bailey Sports. That's why I watched most of the Trey Gibson start, but I did go back and watch highlights at least. And yeah, he's just fun to watch. He's not as boring as some guys are on the field. Like, he's slinging the ball. He's fun to watch pitch, period. And I think maybe the first couple games of the season, maybe the cold weather, he wasn't able to get the grip on the ball. But ever since then, like you said, it's been vintage Erman that he showed us last year. And we definitely knew who he was well before last year. He didn't come out of nowhere, but yeah, one of my favorite pitching prospects in the system. I think it's between him and Braxton Bragg right now. They're just going to be so much fun to watch the rest of this year in Double A. I loved it. He's getting strikeouts. He's getting weak contact. It's just, he knows how to pitch, plain and simple.
Absolutely. And with that, now we will go into our final segment of the night. Last call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre or post game drink. And when you're at the game this year, be sure to check out the beer stand behind home plate to get one of Checker Spot's signature beers. The Bird is the word. And in this segment, Bob and I are going to do the normal shout out of players outside the top 30 portion of our top 50 prospects list for something they've done recently, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or just something interesting in their stat line. And one thing that I think we're going to be talking about in the near future, or very near future, in more depth, is how good the FCL Orioles have looked over the first couple of weeks of the season on both sides of the ball. But we are going to touch on that a little bit here, because there's some guys on that roster that get shout outs in this segment. I'll start with Bob, because his position player, I think, is a guy that we were very excited to see coming into this year. And his pitcher is someone on that FCL pitching staff that's making a name for himself early in this season.
Yeah, for my hitter, I had to go with Nate George, because he is just destroying FCL pitchers, and he's not even 19 years old yet. He turns 19 a little bit over 2 weeks, and I'm kind of curious if he's going to make it up to Delmarva before he turns 19 in a little over 2 weeks, because my goodness, he's batting .385 with an 1138 OPS. And is this before today's? Yeah, this is before today's game. So he went 3 for 4 with a walk in his third home run today. So before that, already he was batting .385 with a 1138 OPS, 201 WRC plus, 269 ISO, 15.6% walk rate, 18.8% strikeout rate. This kid is 18 years old. We heard the hype from Matt Blood coming into the season, and he's lived up to it and then some. He also has, I think he had 2 more stolen bases today, so 5 stolen bases. Just doing everything. And yeah, the BABIP is high, but it's even with if you took that away, he's just been absolutely phenomenal. And this is a guy that was a 16th round pick, signed for $455,000 out of Manuka Community High School. So what a find by the Orioles here. I think this kid is going to get on the radar very soon. And like I said, I think he will be up helping Delmarva sooner rather than later. And then my pitcher is Jesus Palacios, who is a right-handed pitcher, 20 years old, just turned 20 in March, 6'2". He had an incredible 2023 down in the DSL over a little over 50 innings. He had a 1.95 ERA, 2.68 FIP, struck out 28.8% of batters, only walked 6.3%. And then last year he went up to the FCL and only pitched 28 innings, had a 5.08 ERA, was striking out more batters, but walking a lot more. And this year, repeating the FCL in his first 10.2 innings, he's got a 4.22 ERA, but he's striking out a ridiculous 40.7% of batters, which is 22 batters in 10 2/3 innings. He has walked 9 batters, but if you're striking out that many, that kind of negates it. And I do think he's gonna be one of, if not the breakout pitcher on the international side coming from the FCL, get to Delmarva, just continue to improve throughout the season. Yeah, special arm from him and a bunch of the other guys down in the FCL, which I'm sure we'll shout out at some point during the season. But today it's Jesus Palacios time.
Yeah, and I think one thing we saw last year with this shift in the FCL schedule where their season starts earlier now, and Delmarva, I think, will still have about a month left when the FCL wraps up. Ibra Cartaya, Killer Morphe got the bump to Delmarva late last season. I think that Palacios could be a guy that gets the same treatment if he continues to pitch well this year. I'm going to stick in the FCL for my hitter, and that is Andrew Tess. Tess had a very hot start to the season. He cooled off a little bit last week, but the numbers overall are still impressive. With Monday's game included, he's hitting .296 as of this recording with an .842 OPS, and most impressively, 7 walks to 6 strikeouts. One of the things that we talk about a lot on this show is that it's the short season levels for hitters. We like to look at the walk to strikeout numbers because that's an indicator of a lot of things. It's an indicator of their pitch recognition, their ability to judge the strike zone, their ability to not chase, which you're going to be doing a lot of in short season ball if you're aggressive. So to see Tess showing that level of plate discipline is very encouraging. And Tess, by the way, 12th round pick for the Orioles out of Calvary Christian High School in Clearwater, Florida in last year's draft. There was a little bit of buzz surrounding him coming into this year and the early goings of the season show why that's the case. And for my pitcher, I'm going to go up to Aberdeen. Carter Baumler is back from injury, and it has been a struggle throughout Baumler's professional career to stay healthy. That is very well documented at this point, but nonetheless, it was nice to see him have a really good week for the Ironbirds. He got 2 appearances in their series against Hudson Valley. The first of those was 2 scoreless innings, the strikeout, no hits, no walks. He was credited with a save in that game, the second game of a doubleheader, and then pitched 3 days later and delivered a scoreless inning out of the bullpen. I'm guessing that role is a sign of what is to come for Baltimore, which is that he's going to be out of the bullpen, probably 1 or 2 inning appearances. But for someone who's still just 23, you just want to see him stay healthy, show what he can do over an extended run, and hopefully we get that here over the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. He still has the same stuff that he came up with. So just a matter of staying healthy. I like it Hunter Harvey style. Just get him in shorter stints. Maybe he can go up the system faster at his age, and until his arm implodes, you can try to get as much out of him as possible. Rooting for the kid, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And with that does it for this week. So we will be back, all 3 of us, next week to break down the latest news in Birdland. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Substack, and Twitch. We are at Substack at OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon, sign up to become a member of our community today. You can join for as little as $3 a month as a paying member and have access to bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. And it is worth noting that June update is not too far away. We're less than 2 weeks away from when we're going to take another look at our top 50. We already know that we're going to have at least one notable change because Kobe Mayo has graduated since our last list was complete. So there's a spot opening up there, but in what has been an interesting month of May, some players are making cases to rise up the list. So you're not going to want to miss that when we drop that on Patreon in a few weeks. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.